The Maiden of the Forest by pumpkinmoose22. Chapter 12. The sun was at its lowest setting in the sky by the time Kit and the rest of the guard reached the inn on the edge of the city, called the Nightingale, named because of the large amount of birds dwelling in the vicinity. It was a quaint little place, and Kit was positively delighted when he was treated like one of the soldiers, as the innkeeper's wife threatened that if he was caught roughhousing they'd be kicked out in the streets, King's Guard or not. "You can keep your horses in the stall round the back," she continued, waving her plump hand to the right. "Dinner's already on the table, so be quick about it. Oh, and if you want to wash up in the morning, the trough's also back where the horses are. Breakfast, eggs and bacon, will be ready at sun-up. Your keys are inside on the counter. Joyce will show you to your rooms. And don't any of you think of placing a hand on her, or I'll whack you so hard you'll see stars for a year." And with that, the rotund lady disappeared back inside. Victor, one of the soldiers Kit had conversed with the entire way to the inn, turned to him and cleared his throat nervously. "I apologise for the lady's brazen word, Majesty." Several of the soldiers were also shooting Kit nervous glances. Kit, however, burst out laughing, surprising them. "I like her," he said happily. "She's got quite a bit of spirit." "What is her name again?" "Beatrice, Your Majesty," Percy answered. "I shall have to remember her in the future," Kit chuckled. "And gentlemen, please, you mustn't address me so formally. Christopher will do." "But, sire, it is rather difficult for us to do such a thing." Kit leapt from his horse. "Anything can be done if you've got the determination and will to do it. Now, come on. She did want us to hurry to dinner, and I do not intend to get any further on the lady's bad side." Nearly whistling, Kit walked his horse towards the stalls behind the inn. He couldn't ride Tiberius, in fear the Grand Duke would recognise the animal, so he'd settled for an older male he'd christened Arthur. He had been a little different to ride, but the two had been well able to communicate rather than halfway to the inn. Kit guided Arthur into an empty stall, tied his bridle and rubbed his head. "Thank you for bearing me, my friend," he muttered. The dark brown horse stared at him with a peaceful demeanour. Kit smiled. He had always loved horses, ever since he was little, and seemed to have a very good handle on how to take care of them. He could tell that Arthur was what might be called a softy, if known how to be treated. Kit scratched his dark head once more before following the other soldiers back around the corner. To Kit's slight surprise, the search party they were here to replace stood outside the inn. They must have finished a little early today. Frowning, Kit made sure to conceal himself towards the back of his group. "Sir Percy, you are early," Captain Alistair said. "At the King's wishes, sire," Percy replied without a hint of nerves. "His Majesty didn't have to get involved," the Grand Duke replied as he hopped down from his horse. "We were just about to send for you." "Forgive me for saying, Your Grace, but our young monarch is rather restless in regards to the search," Percy said while Kit had to hide his smile. The man was playing his part well. "Be that as it may, we are doing all we can to find the lady." The Grand Duke nearly snapped in frustration. "Do you know how many desperate women we've had to endure on this venture?" "I am sure the number is quite high, Your Grace." The Grand Duke shuddered. "I myself will be very glad when this search comes to an end. This is getting ridiculous." And without another word, the Grand Duke entered the inn wearing a rather remarkable scowl. The man's contempt over this entire ordeal caused Kit a hint of sadness. Though he had known that the fairy had been right, there was still a part of him that hoped the Grand Duke would not be so blatantly against him. "The Duke is just tired," the Captain Alistair assured the guards with a weary smile. "Sir Tristan," he called to a man still on horseback. "Yes, sir?" "You and your men are free to return to the palace. The King thanks you for the time you have taken in the past 2 days to be a part of the search." "It is an honour to look for His Majesty's future bride," Tristan replied. "I pray that tomorrow will bring you better fortune than we have had." Captain Alistair nodded, looking troubled. Kit really wanted to talk to him, but now was not the proper time. The current search party turned their horses back to the palace, while Kit's company followed the captain into the inn. The accommodations were small, much smaller than anything Kit had ever experienced. He was used to grand halls filled with light, objects dusted in gold, and drapes of the softest velvet. He wasn't familiar with the scene now before him, where everything was made of wood, and large shadows cast the hardly lit inn into darkness. The cotton curtains covering the windows were rather dirty from the daily dust blowing in from outside, and the wooden floors, though clearly swept, had stains from what Kit hoped were just previous food and drink, though there were several spots dark enough to be dried blood. A few men sat around the table with kegs of ale, laughing riotously while telling tales of their travels. A girl with slightly dirty cheeks and long unkempt hair walked around the room cleaning up remains of leftover meals. Kit noticed that the lamps lining the walls were slightly dusty, like the curtains around them, and a couple of spider webs hung in nooks and crannies. A wooden staircase in the corner led to the upper rooms, where the guests stayed, the second floor's landing visible from the ground, a long plank of wood being the only thing preventing one from falling off the edge. Kit joined the other soldiers as they took up seats around several wooden tables, noticing that while Captain Alistair sat with them, the Grand Duke had retired to his room. Kit made sure to sit a different table from the captain for now, determining the best time to converse with him would be after everyone had retired. The young girl with slightly dirty cheeks, Kit surmised was Joyce, the girl Beatrice had spoken of. She appeared to be around the age of 14. Her green dress had several patches near the bottom. Her long black hair hung in her face, hiding her fair complexion, and she appeared to be terrified to speak to any of the soldiers when she set down their food and ran away without a word. Kit watched her go with concern. "Is she being mistreated here?" he asked to Victor, who had already begun to eat the stew placed in front of him. "Who?" Victor asked, appearing oblivious. "The waitress," causing several of the soldiers around him to look at Joyce as she served another table. "Young lasses at these kind of places will sometimes fall victim to lesser men, sire," Charles, the guard to his right, muttered quietly. Kit looked outraged. "This is something that happens in every inn." A few of the men looked at each other before nodding. Furious, Kit nearly blew his cover, for he had stood with the intention of going to the innkeeper's wife and demanding to know if Joyce had been mistreated recently. Christopher, what are you doing?" Kit paused, remembering himself, closing his eyes. He took a deep breath before lowering back into his chair. "I am displeased with this news," he muttered. "Is there anything that can be done to prevent this from happening?" "That's the way things have always been," Charles said with a sad expression. Kit frowned. He suddenly didn't want to eat anymore. Pushing his food away, he leaned into one hand while drumming his fingers on the other against the table. The soldiers watched him nervously, afraid what he might do. "There must be something I can do as king to change all of this," he muttered to himself while glancing again at Joyce. She was over by the group of men he had noticed when they first came in. His eyes narrowed when he caught snippets of their conversation. "What's your name?" one of them was asking her. "You're pretty scrawny, but there must be something good about you. Why didn't you come a little closer so I can find out?" Joyce ignored him as she tried to clear their table. One of the men grabbed her wrist. "Hey, he asked you a question." "Please, let me go," Joyce squeaked. Before he even knew what he was doing, Kit had leapt from his chair and was marching over to the men harassing the young lady. "Gentlemen, I think it would be your best interests of everyone if you kindly unhand the young miss," he said, his voice radiating authority. "And just who do you think you are, telling me what I to do?" Kit's eyes flashed dangerously, but he tried to remain dignified in his response. "My good sir, as a member of the King's Royal Guard, I speak on his behalf in saying that it would do you well to treat his subjects with respect. See that you are handling the lady inappropriately. It is my duty to ask to you to refrain from such behaviour." The man smirked. "I get it. You want her for yourself. You know what? Take her. She's got little if anything to offer anyway." He threw her away from him. The poor girl lost her grip on the dirty dishes she was holding, and there was an almighty crash as the glass collided with the floor. Kit grabbed her to prevent her from falling from the ground too. "What the devil is going on in here?" Beatrice shouted as she emerged from the kitchen. Ignoring her, Kit turned his eye on the man who had insulted the girl, now fighting back sobs in his arms. Rage coursed through him. These men were clearly drunk, but he couldn't help desiring to throw them into the dungeons and leave them there to rot for 1,000 years. "Have courage and be kind." Kit started. His princess's words had fluttered into his brain like a soft butterfly's kiss, and he suddenly felt ashamed for his earlier thoughts. The cowardly thing would be to stoop to these men's levels. The courageous and kind thing to do would be to walk away without blows and intend the poor girl in his arms. Ignoring the men who were now laughing drunkenly, Kit guided Joyce away from them. "Are you all right, miss?" he asked her kindly. Joyce refused to answer, her body trembling as soft sobs escaped her unbidden. Beatrice and several members of the guard had descended upon them. "What have you done to her?" Beatrice accused. "It wasn't him, madam," Victor said, defending Kit. "Those men were treating the lady callously." "Thank you, Victor, but I am able to handle this myself," Kit replied, kindly, before turning to face the innkeeper's wife. "I apologize for the broken dishes, my lady, but I feel it vital to protect your worker rather than save them. Those men were not giving her the proper respect a lady deserves, and I took it upon myself to intervene. As a member of the King's Guard, I promise you that you will be compensated for the damaged items. I suggest this one have the night off and a strong cup of tea to calm the nerves." Unsure of how to respond, Beatrice wordly took Joyce by the shoulders and gently guided the girl into the kitchen, out of sight. The soldiers were all looking at Kit with admiration. Well, all of them, except the certain captain. The coloured man cleared his throat in Kit's ears before whispering, "And just what would His Majesty be doing in an inn disguised as a member of the Royal Guard?" "I should have known you would figure me out, Alistair," Kit said, turning to face him. "After that display, Your Highness, how could I not?" the captain asked in good humour as well as a little sharpness. Seeing that now was as good a time as any, Kit said, "Captain, a few private words, please. Men, stall the Grand Duke any way you can, should he come looking for him." "Yes, Your Highness," Percy replied with a bow. "Sire, do you want us to do anything about those men?" Victor asked. Kit glanced at the drunken men, who were already gone back to their own business. "It would be a waste of your time to do so. Let them be. Captain, I fancy a walk." Once the two had travelled far away enough from the Nightingale Inn, Captain Alistair spoke. "All right, Kit, what are you doing here? And don't tell me it's because you have a sudden desire to rescue mistreated girls working in the Nightingale Inn." Kit smirked a little. "Though I would gladly rescue as many distressed women from a similar position, you are quite right in guessing that isn't the reason for my presence, Alistair." They reached a corner as he continued. "I can no longer entrust the search of my mystery princess in the hands of the Grand Duke." "I thought this was one of the original reasons you asked me to accompany him. Do you not trust I am seeing this search is going as well as you would have it?" "No, that's not what I mean, Alistair. Not at all," Kit said hastily. "The reason I am here is because I was told I needed to see what the Grand Duke was doing with my own eyes, not the eyes of birds." Captain Alistair raised an eyebrow. "Who told you that?" "A fairy godmother," Kit answered. The captain stopped in his tracks. "A fairy godmother," he replied sceptically. "Yes. Look, I know it sounds ridiculous, but this woman has appeared to me once before, back when my father was alive. She advised me to fight against him and voice how I wanted to marry for love. Now she has appeared to me again, and told me what I have to do, and to do just as I said. She performed magic in front of me, Alistair. She repaired the shoe that was broken." Alistair's eyebrows rose higher and higher in his forehead as Kit rambled on. "Is this woman your fairy godmother?" he asked hesitantly. "No. She said she was my future bride's," Kit muttered, waving his hand. "What?" "She also confessed that she was the one who gave my mystery princess her shoes." "So your suspicions concerning magic are true?" "Only to a degree," Kit muttered. "So much remains unclear." "Like whether or not your girl from the forest is from the magical community herself?" "Yes," Kit replied. "But would a fairy have a fairy godmother? If she were a fairy, why didn't she make the shoes herself? Why did she get someone else to make them?" "Perhaps the godmother is better at making shoes," the captain suggested with a slight chuckle. Kit paused. "She did say she was." He shook his head, his thoughts swirling round incoherently. "I don't know, Alistair. I'm even more confused now than I was before." "Are you having doubts about wanting to find the girl?" "What? Of course not. If anything, I'm even more intrigued. I need to get to the bottom of this. The fairy told me that I had to be here, so I am. I can feel I can trust her. So far, everything she has said or done has been in my best interest. I don't believe she would lead me astray now. I honestly feel she wants to help me." The captain observed him for a long moment before clapping a hand on his shoulders. We'll do as she says. I trust your judgment, sire. Kit nodded, suddenly grave. I fear we will have to be even more wary of the Grand Duke than we have been, Alistair. The fairy hinted to me that he doesn't have my best interests at heart, and has been putting up a facade this entire time to appease me. Have you noticed anything odd about him during the search? Not so far, Your Majesty. He seems to be dedicated to the cause. Well, for now, we'll keep him in confidence, but I don't want him to know that I'm here. That much is obvious, seeing you have disguised yourself to be a guardsman. Kit smirked. And I'd like to remain that way until I choose to reveal myself. Until then, you must address me. If you must address me, do so by calling me by my full name. Understood, Christopher. Let us go back, Kit muttered, turning around. You realise that the search in the kingdom is almost complete, don't you? Captain Alistair commented as they neared their destination. Yes. Forgive me then for wondering why you didn't try this endeavour in the first place. I probably would have done so, but I had state business to attend to that a certain captain ordered me to deal with first. The captain chuckled. Right. So it is my fault. Kit laughed at him. When hasn't it been? The two continued to chuckle for a moment before Kit sobered. No. I suppose I didn't come because part of me truly believed the Grand Duke would keep his word. But after the warning I received, I feel differently. I don't know what will come of tomorrow, but I must confess, I'm rather nervous. There is a stir in the air, Alistair. I don't know what it means, but something is about to happen. Let us pray it is fate, working on your side to find the one you yearn for. That is a hope I dare not utter aloud, Kit muttered, but I pray that you're right. Kit had hardly slept. It wasn't because the bed was uncomfortable, nor the accommodations atrocious. He just couldn't sleep. He tossed and turned for hours on end, his thoughts and feelings swirling around like a small tornado within his mind and heart. The morrow would mark the last day of the search. If he didn't find her in the next 24 hours, he had to face that she was in another kingdom, and that thought terrified him. The world was so much more of a bigger place than the kingdom of Veritas. This truly distressed his spirit. He shouldn't be thinking this way. He had to keep hold of the hope that fate would work in his favour. Please, he silently pled, please bring me to her. That was his last thought before falling asleep in the early morning. A couple of hours later, a hand was shaking him awake. Kit turned over to find Christopher and Charles already dressed and standing over him. They looked sheepish. Forgive us, but you already missed breakfast, and the Grand Duke says we have to be on the road in 20 minutes. Kit sat up, stretching. Thank you for waking me then, he replied with a smile, trying to ease them. Don't look so upset, gentlemen. I'm not angry. We are still sorry not waking you, Victor muttered. We weren't sure if we should. Kit laughed, throwing the covers aside to dress. I give you all permission. You need to do so in the future. Remember, I told you to treat me as if I was one of you. And if that means waking me up with a bucket of ice water, then so be it. We would never dream of doing such a thing. Charles gasped. Kit waved them off, laughing. He had to store his royal garb under the bed so as not to alert the Grand Duke should he pop in during the night for any reason. The men in the room watched in slight apprehension as Kit raised an eyebrow. My good sirs, I am completely capable of dressing myself. Contrary to what may be said, Henry and Lance don't always dress me. Several men relaxed. Chuckling inwardly, Kit pulled on his breeches, boots, and white undershirt before walking over to the mirror to tie his bright blue cravat. Once that was done, he pulled his light green vest and green jacket on. Smirking to himself, he realised the outfit was the same one he had been wearing when he first met his mystery princess. We'll be heading out in a few minutes, men, Percy's voice called from the other side of the door. That means you should be heading to the stables now. Kit walked over to his bed to throw on the deep blue soldier's uniform over his shoulders. It went all the way down to his ankles, thoroughly covering his royal garb. The other soldiers, already dressed, refused to leave the room until he was thoroughly concealed. Smiling appreciatively to them, he donned the black helmet, signalling he was ready to leave. They were on the road 5 minutes later, Kit hiding in plain sight. The Grand Duke and Captain Alistair were in the front of the party, while he rode beside Victor in the formation. They rode 2 by 2, 7 rows each. People had lined the streets to watch and wave at them as they passed. They rode until they came to a cobbled road on the edge of the kingdom, and the process began allowing every woman on the street to try on the shoe. Kit cringed as he watched firsthand the frenzy Captain Alistair had described in his letters. Women screamed and huffed, trying to force the shoe onto their feet. One burst into tears when her foot slipped inside but was too small for the shoe. Kit felt bad for these women. They really wanted to be his future wife, even though all of them knew they hadn't danced with him. "I have never seen such hysterics in all my life," he muttered to Victor as they left the house of one girl who had literally rolled around on the floor shouting that the shoe had shrunk and was really hers. "In case His Highness didn't realise, he truly is a man many women in the kingdom desire to marry," Victor replied. Kit smirked. "Apparently so." Before they knew it, the sun had already passed noon, and the search was about to come to an end. They were travelling down a road surrounded by trees on both sides, and all in the company were disheartened. Well, all except the Grand Duke. "What's wrong, Captain?" he heard the Grand Duke ask in a merry tone. "We haven't found the girl," Captain Alistair replied. "I am disappointed for our king." "Oh, come now, there is still one house left," the Grand Duke said cheerfully. "Don't lose heart." The last house was charming in its own way, surrounded by large stone walls covered slightly in vines. Kit could tell it was an old establishment. A large fountain stood before the house, the water containing leaves and a thin layer of silt at the bottom. The grounds looked like there was an attempt to keep them clean, but Kit couldn't deny the job appeared poorly done, as if in haste. The manor itself was made of stone. It was a large dwelling, with a friendly kind of feeling to it. Once the company had come to a rest, the large wooden doors were pulled open, and a woman dressed in an elegant black and green dress awaited them, bowing deeply before ushering the Grand Duke and Captain Alistair inside. Kit waited nervously, fidgeting back and forth. The doors remained open, allowing them to hear the shrieks and shouts of pain as someone within tried to force the shoe on. Kit sighed. "Another failed venture," he whispered. "Don't lose heart just yet, sire." Victor whispered back, "Your lady might still be inside." But after a second round of anguished cries was heard, the Grand Duke and Captain Alistair appeared in the doorway. The first rather pleased, the second greatly discouraged. Kit's heart dropped like a stone. She wasn't here. Bowing his head in despair, he felt as if he would cry then and there. And then he heard it. "Lavender's green, dilly dilly, lavender's blue." It was a voice that seared down to his very soul, causing it to resonate. His heart seemed to swell as it took courage. The tone of the sweet voice didn't belong to either of the women he had heard earlier shrieking in attempts to try the shoe on. This voice was different, soft, melodious, enchanting. "Do you hear that, Your Grace?" Captain Alistair asked, pausing on the steps. "Let us be off, Captain," the Grand Duke ordered a little worriedly. "Just a moment," the captain interjected, smiling as a thought came to mind. "Madam," he called to the woman in the green dress who had been about to close the door. She paused, her expression seeming to Kit like a frightened deer as she looked at the captain. "There is no other maiden in your house?" he prompted. Eyes wide, she glanced at the Grand Duke. "None," she hastily replied. Kit narrowed his eyes in suspicion. "Then has your cat learned to sing?" Captain Alistair sneered, also sensing something deceitful was taking place. "Oh, ha 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 ha!" The woman gave an incredibly fake laugh before glancing at the Grand Duke in panic. "There has been enough play acting today, Captain," the Grand Duke said dismissively. Let us be off." "But she is lying, Your Grace," Captain Alistair protested. "Nonsense! I trust the lady," the Grand Duke snapped. Kit had heard enough. The Grand Duke had revealed his true colours, and Kit bet his kingdom the woman singing somewhere inside had been the one he was looking for. The moment had arrived to reveal himself. Removing his hat and handing it to Victor on his right, he firmly cried, "Grand Duke!" The Grand Duke twisted around, his eyes growing to the size of goose eggs, as Charles pulled the guard's cloak from Kit's shoulders. Captain Alistair bowed with a pleased smirk, knowing the Grand Duke wouldn't be able to outrank the king. The lady in the doorway curtsied, positively stunned by the sudden appearance of a royal. "Your Majesty," she gasped, her eyes just as wide with surprise as the Grand Duke's. "What sweet singing?" Kit sighed, staring upwards. "Makes me want to tarry just a little." "Your Majesty," the Grand Duke sputtered. I did... Captain," the Kit interrupted, "would you be so kind as to investigate?" "It would be my pleasure, Your Majesty." Captain Alistair grinned before following the lady inside. Kit dismounted his steed and glanced at the Grand Duke with a mixed look of pure disappointment and slight fury on his face, before walking straight into the house. End of chapter 12. Hi guys, hope you enjoyed this. Really love that. I like how Peter's stepped away for Kit, and how Kit developed that rapport with the men and saved that poor girl. Poor Joyce, only 14, and have that happen to her. God, I am so glad we don't live in those days anymore. Yeesh. Though I won't deny it does happen. And things are warming up with Ella and Kit. I'm sorry if you guys don't like my singing voice. I have sung a couple of lines in a few other of my stories, but I don't think I have a very nice voice. At least for singing. I've always been told I like storytelling. So anyway, have a good day, night, whatever time zone you're in. Bye, my guys, gals, and non-binary pals. I'll see you in another chapter, and hopefully Ella and Kit will be reunited. No spoilers though. See ya. Bye.